Well, I'm Shirley Haycock, used to be a Richardson when I was younger. And I was born on the 17th of December, 1932. And I live in the town of Spring Glen. Well, I was raised here in Carbon County. And I lived several places like San Francisco and Denver and places like that. And then I came back. I had 2 sons at that time. And I lived with my parents. And I was out of a job, and I went to the state employment office and said, I need something to do. And they called me up one day, and he said, Shirley, would you mind going into the mines? They've rescinded the law. The law had stood on the books since the 1800s that women would not go underground. And so I had just visited a mine maybe 6 months before, and it's dark in there, and it's noisy. And I said after I came out, I don't think I want to work in that noisy place. Well, when they offered me a chance to try it, I said, good, I'll go try it.
How was it like being the first woman underground?
Hilarious. First off, the rumor got around in a hurry. Coal miners are as gabby as women are. And they realized that I was going to be there, you know. So when I showed up at the coal mine, they're all sitting on the bench, and they're not going to go underground. Well, when Johnny come over and got me, and he said, I have to go down with you because you're a newbie, you know. And so the man trip at Kaiser was a little train. And he took me up and put me on the first car and got in and sat down beside me. And I thought, well, are those guys all going to stay in the bathhouse? So the train went underground. And when we got down to where I was supposed to start working, I noticed the guys were all on board the train. And they were just determined that I wasn't going to succeed at this. Well, I'm kind of a quiet person. I don't make a lot of noise when I'm around, and they put me on a beltline. So it was out of sight, out of mind. And I run that beltline for, 6 months.
Tell me what a beltline is. What's it do?
Well, the section I was in was longwall mining. And as the rotor heads cut the coal down, it falls on a belt, unlike the old method of putting it into a coal car and shipping it out. It falls on a belt, and it's carried by the belt out to the loader head. Now, this belt line went clear out of the mine, so they didn't have to have any of us shovel or anything else to get it out to the thing. And the coal, there's more coal at a time comes across it. And the belt person, that's what they had to call me, because he said, well, you can't be a belt man, you're not a man. And he said, it doesn't sound right to call you a belt woman, so they called me a belt person. But anyhow, it was my job to make sure that the coal and the coal dust didn't pile up under it and create the problem of a possible explosion, because coal dust is very volatile, and it will explode easily. And so I told him I want a rake. And they laughed at me. What would you do with a rake underground? Well, I showed you. It just took the rake, went like this under the belt line. It turned the rock dust over and buried the coal dust. And the mine inspector come in. He says, I've never seen it as clean as Shirley keeps it.
What did your family think about it?
Well, they were kind of against it in the beginning. But after I'd been there a couple of months, I didn't pay no more attention. I've always done jobs like a man. I worked construction companies and things like that. And I never was a secretary. I guess I didn't look like one, didn't act like one, and didn't dress like one, so.
What would have been a typical day when you ran the belt?
I always tried to be there half hour early so I would be ready to go underground. You had to pick up your lamp and get your brass and all of this to take with you so that they didn't lose you under there, you know. The men had a bathhouse, and there were baskets on the ceiling, and that's where their mine clothes were kept when they weren't wearing them. And, or I should say that's where they put their clean clothes, and then they run them up to the ceiling, and miners' clothes hung on the wall. But since I was a woman, one of the things that I heard is, I'm not taking a bath with a woman standing around. Well, I'm not the kind to take a bath with a bunch of men standing around either. My understanding is we had one woman who did exactly that because they wouldn't provide her a bathhouse. She went right in and took a bath with the guys. Of course, the guys got out of the way, but but that wasn't my style. I just said, well, I'm working, I'm making good money, I'm not going to worry about it. And I would go there in my work clothes. They were clean. I'd work a shift and they'd be dirty, but I've had a quilt over my car seat, and I got in my car and went home and bathed at home. So that's kind of how I handled it. The next two women they hired at Kaiser, they put a bathhouse in for them. I was on the belt, I think, 9 months. Almost a year I was on the belt. And then I got a bid on a buggy. A buggy is a unit that comes up behind the miner, continuous miner. This is not where, it's a different situation than what I just tell you I did. Anyhow, it's a large machine that has a rotary head on the front, and it cuts the coal down. And it makes entryways so that the air can be diverted wherever you want it. But in order to move the coal out of the way and get it out of the mine, they load it into what's called a buggy. And the buggy only goes one direction. It goes out, and then you have to go backwards to come back, you see, because you're hooked to electric cable. And it was kind of fun because they challenged me, to get it done faster, get it. So one night I was going along just doing my thing, and I forgot to go back. I turned around with the other one, and I run over the cable and broke it. So they fixed it, and then I minded my P's and Q's and went the right direction from then on. Well, I didn't realize it till several days later, and they were telling me that I'd set a new record for the mine. And the other mining crew was busting their butts to try to match it, When you don't have longwall, you're limited to how much coal you bring out at a time. Longwalls will produce millions of tons a year, where a continuous miner doesn't.
So you learned to run a belt and you learned to run a buggy. What else did you learn to run?
Oh, I even tried a miner. I hadn't had any prior experience on it, but I got the bid. And so I spent a day trying to mine coal. And when I got through, they said, Shirley, do you really want that job? And I said, no, I don't want that job. So they gave it to a fellow who had some experience. But I thought it was kind of an interesting experience because I found out it wasn't as easy as it looked. If you don't go into an area just right, it can push you back out. It can tip down this way. Coal is not all the same hardness. And maybe you hit a hard streak and a soft streak, and you'll gouge out that soft streak a lot deeper than the hard streak is, And I thought, boy, there's too many things here I don't know.
What kind of training did they give you since you'd never mined before?
Actually, they gave me no training prior to going underground. Do I talk with my hands? But they had classes, and I made sure I was to every class that taught safety and all kinds of techniques. And I'm a curious person. I love education. And so I felt like that it behooved me to take in everything they offered. And it was fun, The guys didn't expect me to do it that way, but I said, if I'm here, I'm going to learn about it.
How long were you the only woman underground in that mine?
Over a year. Yeah, I think all of the mines around just said, well, we'll see how she works out. The first thing I know they wanted to know is how much hanky-panky's going on downstairs. Well, with me, there's no hanky-panky. I just felt like it was out of place. I can work as hard as a man does, but I don't have to act like a woman when I'm underground. So, and I don't tell dirty jokes. I figure that's a come on, and I didn't need no come ons while I was there. And so I try to keep everything above board, so that if other women wanted to go underground, they didn't have a bad reputation to fight.
What did a miner in those days earn? Were you paid by hour or per ton of coal that you moved? How did that work?
Well, by the time I got in there, the unions were very strong, and we were paid by the day. And the various jobs made different amounts of money. As a belt person, I made about $27. What was it? Oh, I have to. $27 a day, I think, was what I was making. I know that doesn't sound a lot, but you put that in 20 days, it was a pretty good paycheck for me, because most of the jobs I've been working up to prior to that were $1.25 an hour, $1.50 an hour. And so I was kind of happy to get a job I thought I could raise my family on.
And when you got into the Buggy, was that more or less?
Yeah, that was more. That was about $37 a day.
And was both the beltline and the Buggy out at the Kaiser Mine?
Yeah, yeah.
Have you worked in any other mines?
I worked in the Braztah mine up Hartscrabble Canyon. And they kept me down to being a mason. They didn't want me on the mining crews. They didn't want me getting in the way of all these guys, you know. I thought it was kind of interesting myself. And I didn't mind being a mason.
What's a mason do?
You put in stoppings to make sure that the air flows the way they want it to flow. And they were cinderblock stoppings. And then I had to go by and seal them off so the air couldn't escape through them. And when they started pulling pillars in various areas, they just pushed them over.
When you were underground, did you have any close calls?
Well, other than rocks popping out of the sidewalls, I had a chunk about the size of this chair come out one night, just as I came out of the lunchroom. And it blink, and I thought, oh, wow, that could be dangerous. Other than that, I can't remember of any problems that I really run into. We was in Kaiser Mine, and we heard what appeared to be an earthquake or a shake, and there was a section of the mine that was on fire, and it evidently collapsed, and it filled the air with dust. And so the boss and I walked out to the main shaft there to get and send the man trip down so they could take us out. They couldn't even see us. He said, I can't send the man trip down because I can't see anything down the slope. So we had to walk out, which was interesting because you had to go through a lot of doors that were, Kaiser was a big mine. It wasn't nearly, Braztah was a little mine. And it was 4 miles, almost 4 miles out. And we went in number 3 portal, we come out number 1. And I thought, well, now I know how they get miners out of the mine.
Do you think that the reason some of the fellas were reluctant to accept you had to do with superstitions about women in the mine?
Oh, you bet, you bet. Some of those folks come from old Greek, the original old Greek and Italian families that come in, and they had heard Mom and Dad talk about the fact that it was bad luck for a woman to go underground. It would cause all kinds of problems underground. And I understood where they were coming from, but I needed a job. And so I challenged them. And it was interesting that they kind of laid aside their superstitions after they saw I wasn't going to fall for what they were proclaiming.
Do you think you were ever accepted as a member of the mining crew?
We were underground at Kaiser one night. And there was a big red-headed fellow on our crew. And there was a Mexican fellow coming. I'm just saying this because that was his nationality. He came around the corner and he was swearing up a blue streak. And old Dave got darn near as red in the face as he was in his hair, and he reached over and grabbed that guy and he said, "Don't you ever talk that way around Shirley again." And I figured, I'm accepted. I only lasted 4 years in the coal mine. I was at Braztah, and I had a buggy I was taking out to get rock dust or get mix for my blocks. And it dropped in a hole. One of the wheels did, and threw my head up against the roof. And from that day forward, I couldn't wear a hat worth a hoot. And I finally lost the grip in my hands. And you got to have a hat hold tight to a hammer if you're going to swing it. And sometimes it just fly right out of my hand. Come find out it damaged a disc. You know, people talked about me being in the mine and all of that, and I didn't think I was doing anything so outstanding or out of the line. It was just a job to me.
Is that still true now that you think about it? Was it just a job, or has it taken on a different light?
Well, it's taken on a little different light now because I can look back at it in retrospect and understand that people don't generally step out and do that sort of thing. You know, in all of my associates, there's not a one of them that's done some of the things that I've done. And mining was one of those oddities. I really don't think the coal mine is good for a woman, in that it's hard work, extremely hard work. And women should be a little more gentle. But what else can I say? Right now, my mining is clay. I sculpture. It isn't as hard on my back and neck as coal mining is.
So you worked for 4 years in underground.
Yeah, and I probably wouldn't have quit then, except I got hurt. And I thought, oh, well, they'll just operate on that and clear it up and I'll go back to work. Well, it wasn't that easy. The doctor made me wait 8 months before they ever tried to operate on it because they wanted to see if it would heal itself up. And they operated on it. And in order to heal it up in a hurry, I took a walk into the Grand Canyon for 10 days. Well, if you keep all that blood circulating, girl, it heals faster. But you don't quit living just because you're 80. You got to keep things going.